The woman had been flirting with him for almost over 15 minutes before he invited her to accompany him in the garden for some fresh air. Glancing out the patio doors into the darkness, she smiled. That was exactly what she'd been aiming for, and she consented freely to follow him outside. After all, he was a very well-built man, maybe quite too well, she thought when she noticed him for the first time. Her mouth watered while her eyes perused the expanse of his broad shoulders and strong hands. She needed a man. It had been some time since a man's strong hands roused her, probably too long, if she considered the flutter in her belly. The physical desire had been compelling enough, but more important and decisive for her had been the signs hinting to his wealth. The man was wealthy enough for her tastes. His suit wasn't a cheap imitation, but a true Armani. She'd always had an eye for such things. They strolled leisurely along the gravel path as she clung to his sturdy arm. He murmured some inconsequential things, and she didn't bother to listen. The power she could feel under her fingers was as exciting as the heavy smell of the roses lining the one side of the trail. She smelled romance in the air and smiled. A few more steps, and the roses made way to berry bushes. The smells changed, and the heat of the summer night enveloped them in a humid cocoon. The shingle path disappeared, and she stumbled when her foot stepped on cracked soil. Both chuckled, although embarrassment powdered her cheeks with a slight blush. He silently provided more support to her, and a giddy feeling bubbled in her veins. When he hastened his steps, she giggled softly and commented playfully on his haste. He was watching the trees, distracted, and didn't give any sign that he'd heard. That determined her to bring a halt to their fast advancement through the garden. It might have been romantic, yet it didn't seem very wise. She was alone with the man she'd just met, and didn't know anything about him. It was her first time there, and she hadn't been aware that the garden grounds were so extensive and secluded. Besides, while she had all intentions to flirt with him, she didn't have any intentions to succumb to his charms that night. It was never a good idea to give in too soon. She wanted much more than a tumble in the hay, and that meant that she had to play hard to get for a while. Men liked the hunt. They enjoyed the scent of their prey and the efforts that came with their chase. The huge man glanced at her. His eyes showed understanding, and he allowed her to move at a slower pace. She was wearing stilettos, and her feet thanked him. When she put on her high heels that evening before the party, she hadn't meant to wear them on that hard ground. Once they were about 40 meters away from the house, and in the shadow of the trees lining that side of the garden, the man grabbed her arm and nudged her to a deserted corner. He put enough strength behind his action, and the brutal move startled her. A shiver played on the back of her neck and sent tentacles along her spine and the back of her legs. A spine-chilling feeling replaced her light-hearted mood from before, but she didn't take it lying down. She tried to reason with him at first. She preferred to assume that maybe he was too anxious to be alone with her, and that was why his attitude changed. Her well-chosen words fell on deaf ears, though, and she stopped pretending. She began to oppose him, but it was as if she'd been trying to stop a river flow. Indifferent to her pleas, he dragged her for a few more meters. She continued pleading with him because she didn't see any other solution, but her attempts failed. She replenished her efforts to fight him, tried to dig her heels into the ground, but the soil was too dry, and she couldn't get any traction. She just stirred up a cloud of dust that rushed to find a home in her pores. Her legs turned to jelly, and she barely kept herself upright. Something was definitely wrong with what was going on there. Both her self-confidence and sense of safety had slowly skulked away during the forced walk through the trees. Tinges of electrical shocks ran through her arms. She panicked, and tears burned her cheeks. She felt ashamed of her weakness, tried to hold them back, but the cold fingers of fear kept squeezing her heart in an iron fist, and her breath became ragged. Probably sick of her puny attempts to detangle herself off him, he finally stopped and moved to stand before her. Through the stream of her stubborn tears, she surveyed the man's stony face with dread. The man wasn't even blinking, and that disconcerted her more.